and welcome to the first in a regular series of Comics Bursts from the Full Force podcast, sponsored by Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, where we take an in-depth look at the newest G.I. Joe comics and related titles of the week. I am Chris McLeod, aka Diagnostic 80, and joining me on this burst tonight is the lucky charmer himself, Paddy, for feck's sake, Lennon. So let's get... Oh, I almost did it in an Irish accent. So let's get into our first comic. Oh, and I should say, spoilers ahead. So first up is Transformers vs. the Visionaries issue 3. So far, the Visionaries have taken over a small part of Cybertron, but it is expanding thanks to the Talisman. You know, if you go way back through First Strike and Revolution and all those comics, you'll understand what that means. I'm not going to go into it now. The Transformers have attempted to negotiate and failed, with the death of Kup serving as a reminder of the effect the Visionaries' magic has on them. The Spectral Knights have been banished from New Valaric and Viralina has taken charge. The third instalment of this interesting series sees the Spectral Knights form an alliance with the Autobots in an attempt to hit back at the Darkling Lords and Merklin with a stealth assault led by the very suspicious Mordred. Meanwhile, Wheeljack has found a way to briefly pause the effects of the Visionaries' magic on the Cybertronians, testing it on Breakdown's dead arm that was damaged by magic in a previous issue. Now, before we get into this actual comic, Paddy, this of the Visionaries has never been a brand that you've been that fond of, but how have you found the comic so far?
Well, I wouldn't say fond of, just not familiar with, because I just never had the toys. I think I tell a lie, I might have had Cryotech when I was a kid. And that is my sole memory of the Visionaries as a line. Like, I know of them, but I don't remember watching the cartoon, and I don't remember reading. There was a UK comic as well back in the day,
yeah,
right?
It was amazing. Yes.
Yeah, I don't ever remember reading that. So I actually had very little to go off of when reading the Visionary series when it started. Now, I know it seems to be that really hardcore Transformers fans and really hardcore Visionaries fans don't like this series for different reasons.
Yeah.
The Transformers fans don't like it because they killed off Kup. Now that I think about it, it has had more toys in the last 20 years than all of the Visionaries combined.
Yes, that's very true. Even if you count the Series 2 that never made it, Kup has still had more figures than that combined, yeah. And
the Visionaries fans didn't really like it because of the pretty big redesign that has happened for the series. I actually really liked the redesign. I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the descendants of the survivors of an apocalypse, more or less.
Yeah.
And so, they're going to use whatever works, they're going to just put it together with whatever else works. So their armor and stuff is going to be patchwork, and things like that.
Just while you're on that point, I have to agree with that and say that the hardcores from either side have kind of hated it, like you say, for those reasons. The Visionaries fans hating it so much because of this massive redesign. But when you read the comic, the basic things that made the Visionaries really, really, I say popular, but that made them really good for me, and being a hardcore fan of the original that I am, it works. When you read in the comic, the designs make sense, but they don't. Mm-hmm. You can still recognize everything. You can understand what's going on now. I think when you had them out of context at the start, it knocked a few people's noses out of joint, and I think that was was really like, oh, is this what it's going to be like? And it's like, well, actually, if you read the comic, which I think a lot of people haven't bothered doing, I think, and I'm not just saying everyone, I'm sure there are people, hardcore fans, that still aren't enjoying it after reading it, and that's totally fine if that is the case. But I feel like there was almost like a defense mechanism was put up immediately based on just that change. And I think a lot of the other changes, kind of like the ethnicities and the genders, I think kind of needed that as well. And I feel like it's worked in this comic. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, Paddy.
Yeah, I think So I think it is just something where people probably rushed to judgment about it too quickly.
Yeah.
Because actually, I'm enjoying it quite a bit. I wasn't sure if I would, because, like I said, I have no real attachment to the Visionaries characters at all. But it is actually the 3 issues so far have been fairly good comics.
Yeah,
can't argue about that. So so this latest issue actually does like I said, now that they're putting in a little bit more explanation about, where they're coming from, and where the kind of fault lines are between the different characters, I think it's really it's progressing quite nicely. I think there's only, is it 2 more issues left?
Yeah, it's
With
only
the
it's a 5-issue series, which is a shame. I've got a feeling that we might get some offshoots, just a water testing offshoots of the Visionary stuff at this moment, because I feel like it is growing and getting a bit more momentum. I don't obviously jump the gun and say they're going to get a comic after this, because that might not be the case. In actual fact, it's more likely that after this we won't see the Visionaries again for a while. But personally, I think it would, depending on how it finishes on issue 5, I could really see a good solid comic coming out of the Visionaries with this creative team, because I think the pacing's really good. I think the writing's really strong. I think each character is being developed in such a short period of time. We can see the personalities coming through, and they're not all exactly the same as they were in the original. But let's face it, if you watch the original cartoon and you read the original comics, that everyone is very similar. Like everyone has a very similar way about them. There's only a few standouts that really go way out of that template. So you've got like Lexor, who's a bit of a cowardly guy. You've got Mordred, who's like a bit of a bootlicker but is still very confident and all that kind of stuff. And then you've got like the dumb Sindar. Most of the personality, and I'm probably going to get a lot of slack for this, but a lot of the personalities really shine through in the Darkling Lords, more so than the Spectral Knights, who are all very much of a muchness. And I think with this new way of going about it, we're seeing some real personalities coming out in Arzon, who is starting to kind of be a bit of a skeptical guy, but will still do what he's told, but at the same time always has an opinion on stuff. You've got Witterquick, who's like this kind of like, I don't know, he's got this really fun wit about him, no pun intended.
He reminds me a lot of the Flash from the Justice League Unlimited cartoon.
Yes, he's got a bit of humour.
A bit of humour to him, a bit of using the speed for fun, and having fun using his power to show off a little bit, which is kind of a nice character trait with him.
And I think if we're focusing on this comic now, if we're coming into this comic now, I think we do see some more characters pop up. They've even thrown in a big shout out to Fico Ocio, Magdalene Visaggio. They've been throwing in some amazing little nods to Series 2. We've got Kragor in there. I believe there's a few others from the Series 2 line as well that they kind of slipped in, and they have been explained as that's, it's definitely that. It's Laser Lash, I think, is in there too. So there's some really nice nods to Series 2, which again is pure like fan service right there.
It helps fill out the cast as well.
Yeah, totally.
There's not just 5 or 6 of them in each team. There's you can see lots more of them in the background. You have the main 5 Spectral Knights in this issue in particular, but you also see that there's a bunch more of them there in the background that are starting to go over to the other side as well.
Yeah.
People like Cryotech and so on. So it's nice that they're kind of using them. I know they're not because they've only got 5 issues. They can't really have 20 knights in it, or 20 Darkling Lords or whatever, so they have to focus on 3 or 4 on each side. But it is nice that they're giving nods to the wider cast in there.
I think that's actually been something that's been really good about this. It's the choice of characters has been really strong. Obviously, they're kind of go-tos that you kind of expect. And I was really glad to see Mordred appear in this one. I loved his new look. He looks a little bit like me with my haircut when I shave the sides, but and the massive beard. But what I was interested in is when we first see him, he's a little bit snide, conniving, out for himself, etc., etc. And I was thinking, this is really more like Lexor originally. But what I found, obviously, as you go through the issue, that changes, and what you find out at the end is that Mordred's been having these guys on, and he's with Viralina as her right-hand man. So obviously, just as he was with Darkstorm in the originals, Mordred is still the guy that will do anything for whoever the leader. Yeah, for the leader. So he is like, that personality is still intact, which I was actually really pleased about. It was like the whole time he'd just been tricking the Spectral Knights into a trap. So I was really happy that that Magdalene, who writes the actual thing we had on, who interviewed on the show as well not too long ago, I'm really glad she kind of kept Mortrid within that character and not made him Lexor, which I was really worried about as I was reading through. I mean, there are some elements that you kind of like, oh, I could see that coming, or that makes sense. And yes, he is the guy that you think he is at the end. But what I wasn't expecting, so just to give everyone a bit of kind of a background on what's going on in the comic, the Spectral Knights, as I said earlier, were kicked out of New Valaric. They're trying to re-infiltrate, basically to do some recon on what's going on, and they also not recon the character, but the reconnaissance. And they use Mortrid, who has basically been kind of telling these guys that he just wants to get away, he wants to get away from the whole thing. So they kind of use him to break in there because he can transform into a little beetle. So obviously he can kind of get into small crevices and whatnot. Anyway, he leads Arzon and Witterquick through like these back channels to New Valaric. It turns out it's a trap, and lo and behold, Virulina has used the magic on Waspinator to create this amazing wasp chariot kind of contraption, which I just think is amazing. So now we're starting to see them using their magic on the Transformers, but not to kill them, but to kind of turn them into vehicles for their own use.
And actually, when they explain that away, they kind of help to explain away the vehicles from the original series as well.
Yeah.
Where she mentions that occasionally we take broken down vehicles from back when we were a technology-based society, and we run them using magic.
Yeah.
Because we can't power them using, batteries or petrol or whatever.
Yeah.
They just energize them with magic and use them as, they take these old vehicles and re-energize them. And she does essentially the same thing to Waspinator, kills him and uses magic to reanimate the corpse. So I thought that was a nice way of kind of explaining why Visionaries who use magic had vehicles in the original toy series.
Brilliant, wasn't it? Yeah.
It's kind of it's a nice kind of way of saying, well, we have these things are available to us, and this is how we use them and why we use them. So actually, I thought that was kind of a smart nod, I think, to the vehicles in the original line.
Also, I must give a massive shout to Fico Ocio's art. And I mean, it's just and David Garcia Cruz's colouring, because it's just a really beautiful, well drawn book. It everything moves really nicely. There'll be times when not much is going on, but somehow Fico makes everything look really interesting. And I mean, like the characters of edge far more kind of towards the kind of cartoon comic book look than they would the kind of more realistic look like you would get in other kind of comic artist styles. So, but I do like that, and I think it works really well. And yeah, I just think overall an absolutely cracking issue, and a really good kind of series so far. I mean. What would you kind of give in terms of like a score for this one, Paddy? Out of potatoes.
Do you get out of potatoes? Yeah, out of potatoes. We decided instead of General's Joe's, 5 stars for everything. Even moderately good comics, we get 5 potatoes out of 5.
Yes. Definitely.
As a series overall, it's actually probably the thing I'm enjoying. It's not my it's not my favorite series out of the IDW Hasbro stuff at the moment, but it's definitely up there. So it's probably a solid 4 potatoes out of 5 from generalsjoes.com.
Amazing. I'm also going to give it this actual issue was a real. I mean, it had loads going on that I really, really was getting into, like. The whole Waspinator thing was really like a cool little touch at the end as well. The introduction of a lot of Series 2 characters thrown in there, kind of in the background and stuff. So I would have to give this it's going to have to be a 5 potatoes out of 5 for me. I can see this being like a ridiculous scoring system. It already is, because it's definitely not the perfect comic, but I'm really enjoying it, and I think I don't really know what more you need in that sense. So cracking job. Keep that up, Magdalene and Fico and David. And we'll move on now to Rom and the Micronauts. Rom and the Micronauts issue 3. At the heart of the entropy cloud, Rom and the Micronauts enter microspace in an attempt to foil the Dire Wraith's ultimate plan, reviving a cosmic entity that would tear Earth apart. But within the entropy cloud, our heroes must fight Baron Karza and his minions before they can make the Dire Wraith's dark prophecy a reality. Yes, I took that directly from IDW solicitations, because as much as I enjoy the crossover stuff, and I enjoyed Rom's initial appearance in the comics, I've started to go a little cold on them, to be honest, Paddy. I'm not sure if you've read Rom and the Micronauts yet. Have you had a chance?
I should really thank IDW for putting my two least favourite Hasbro entities in one comic that I don't need to buy, so I don't actually buy Rom and the Micronauts.
Well, this is. I want to get your thoughts then on, like kind of in terms of the combined universe, which I don't know. I'm obviously it's another talking point to maybe talk about now, actually, because I don't know when there'd be a better place to talk about it. But do you think, I mean, overall it wasn't the massive success I think they wanted it to be? Now, could you see it continuing, is what I'm really getting at? Can you see this combined universe continuing beyond the end of these comics?
I think it'll be done at the end of this year.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it to you a few weeks ago that over half the comics they launched on the back of the crossover.
Yeah.
What was the crossover for First Strike called again? The big one that launched all this.
Revolution.
Universe.
Revolutions.
Yeah. Half the series that they launched on the back of Revolutions have now been cancelled.
Yeah.
The Transformers Till All Is One is gone. Rom's solo comic is gone. Micronauts' solo comic is gone. And
ongoing G.I. Joe. Yeah.
Ongoing G.I. Joe has now been cancelled. Mask has been cancelled. So that's half of them gone already within 18 months. Obviously, they're not doing as well as they'd hoped in terms of sales. And, I mean, we'll get to Scarlet Strike Force later on, but, I mean, that was cancelled before the first issue was even released, based on the poor pre-orders. So I don't think it's been as successful as they would have hoped. It hasn't. They do these crossovers and these events every year to try getting new people to jump on board. You do something like First Strike in the hope of that it raises all boats, and that every succeeding tie-in issue and every new series on the back of it gets a decent head start in terms of pre-orders and sales. But the issue is they've suffered diminishing returns. They got a fairly decent boost off of Revolution.
Yeah.
And then when they came back to First Strike, the issues that tied in directly to First Strike did okay, and then the issues directly after First Strike finished plummeted.
Yeah.
To levels below where they were before First Strike had happened.
Yeah.
So people are using these things as almost a jumping off point as much as a jumping on point.
Yeah.
Now, where they look at it and go, well, they're relaunching Scarlet Strike Force with a new issue 1. Maybe I don't need to keep reading G.I. Joe anymore because I'm not really enjoying it that much anyway.
Yeah.
We're creatures of habit with our comic buying, I think.
Yeah.
And if you give us if you give us a chance to drop something by cancelling it or leaving it, giving it a gap month or whatever, or changing the title or starting with an issue 1, it seems that as many people stop
as they
start.
do jump. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Coming back to Rom and the Micronauts specifically. Now, Rom, I was really, I kind of, he was one of those characters I thought, this is going to be really cool. I was really excited for it because he was on every cover of literally every IDW thing. They threw a Rom kind of homage in there on the lead up to him, kind of his comic, and that I think that was almost before all of the other comics came into existence. I think Rom was was leading the way in a sense. And I really kind of I dug the whole idea behind it, and I started to get kind of because obviously it's only that action that toy that you're really basing anything on, and some strips of a kind of in the Action Man kind of market, but it's kind of very, I don't know, there wasn't much kind of basis to go with it. I really, really enjoyed the first kind of run, but after a while. And I don't mean this to sound like, because I don't want to come across like we're bashing any of these kind of comics or anything. We're just kind of giving our point of view, really, in a sense.
Wait till we get to Scarlet Strike Force for that.
So with the Rom run, I just tended to find that it never really did anything kind of different. It just stayed in one, each comic Like you could literally, it's almost like a formulaic like copy of the next, and you know, whether that's like a, you know, a purposeful thing or not, it definitely is something I noticed. Sorry, my dog's scratching away and it's making a noise, buddy. Buddy, good boy. Sorry, I'll leave that in. But I think like with Rom, like it never really changed. It was always really just going in the same direction. It was always like, you know, the dire wraith thing at the beginning. It'd be like, oh, like there's been an infection of dire wraiths, and then Rom turns up and neutralizes it, but then almost dies, and then at the end he's back again for the next, you know. And it was all just like the same thing over and over again. And I thought there was no real development, and he's very much like, I don't know, there's not much in the way of personality with him. So it kind of, it makes it difficult to drive the comic a little bit, for me, personally. I mean, I still buy it. Like the Micronauts as well. I mean, that's something that is definitely being pushed by Hasbro as a you know, that they're starting the cartoon. You know, that's now out in the open now, and everyone is aware of that.
It's the second announced movie.
Yeah, exactly. So they're really getting behind Micronauts, which is totally cool. Like, it was an amazing line, a toy line back in the day, and really one that is kind of highly sought after in good condition now as well. So I understand. Sorry, I understand that
he doesn't like Rom either.
No, really. No. Oh, so with the Micronauts, it's a kind of similar thing. Like the way it's been done in the comics, it's almost very much like, oh look, we're tiny things in a big world, and it's like, you know, okay, cool, but then nothing really gets going or happens, and it's just been like, I feel like it's been a non-starter for me personally. And and it's really much of a muchness with the Rom Micronauts comic. Now, I would make a point to say that the Rom Transformers Shining Armor crossover was actually really, really good. I really enjoyed that.
I have it now. I have it all complete there in my comic pile. I haven't got around to reading it yet, but it's kind of been like, I'll get to it eventually.
Well, that one, I think you'll be definitely more impressed with that than the other solo issues and the new crossover, because I think that Rom Transformers, I mean, it seemed to work really nicely, and there was some really good stuff in there. So, you know, that I can, and I tell you what, it's going to come back when we talk about the Transformers stuff. It's going to come back around, because I feel like that the Transformers have lost that conflict in the comics, as in the good versus bad, and that has kind of been missing for a while now. It's just been a bit sporadic and crazy, and we'll come to the Transformers stuff. But it's
funny, actually. I was saying this actually when I was picking up my comics in my local store. The other day, I mentioned we were chatting about this actually, because the owner knows I collect all the Hasbro IDW stuff. And he was talking, and he's a huge, apart from more on my Micronauts, obviously, and he's and Jay, who runs Dumb City Comics, he's a huge toy fan as well. Like all the guys there are, but he would be a huge G.I. Joe Transformers fan as well. We were chatting about this, and I pointed out that actually in the Transformers comics, the Autobots and Decepticons have been at peace for longer than they were at war in the IDW continuity.
Wow! Because
they've been nearly 6 years now since the war ended, and the book split into Robots in Disguise and Mord Meets the Eye, and they'd only had about 5 years of continuous comics prior to that.
Crazy, isn't it?
The Autobots were fighting the Decepticons. Yeah, so they, you know, for pretty much half the time IDW has had the license, there has been no central conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting, and there's been a lot of kind of cool stuff to come out of it, a lot of character development. But again, like it's probably a good idea to move on to that. But before we move on, I'm going to have to give, and you can't give us the score for this because you haven't read it, but for Rom and the Micronauts, I'm going to give it, unfortunately, just the 2 potatoes out of 5. Again, it's still a beautifully drawn issue, some great art in there, some good action, some good movement, but at the same time, like I said before, it just seems to be the same recycled scenario over and over again, and there's only so many times you can kind of really take that. But yeah, again, no, I don't want this to kind of come across as we're bashing it. It's, you know, I want it to be good. But anyway, moving on. Optimus Prime Annual 2018. Lots of Transformers books have been coming out recently, starting with the Optimus Prime Annual. We have a cute side story and a quick flashback from current events happening in the ongoing storyline. Starscream enlists the help of Thundercracker to make a propaganda film focusing on the then leader of Cybertron in order to improve his image on Earth. Have you read this one, Paddy?
I haven't. It is actually, I only picked it up yesterday and haven't had a chance to read it yet. I was trying to get the G.I. Joe comics and Visionaries done because I knew we'd be focusing on them this episode, so I haven't actually got to read it yet. I know there's a couple of G.I. Joe cameos in there.
Yeah.
If I'm right, I think Chuckles and Craig turn up briefly in it.
Yes.
So, that'll be something for the G.I. Joe fans, but I haven't actually got a chance to read the annual yet. No.
Funny you should say that. Obviously, Marissa Fairborn's in it, but she's obviously more Transformers than she is G.I. Joe. In fact, she's purely Transformers.
Separate Amanda.
Yeah, exactly. Chuckles and Crake are in it, and it's basically Thundercracker imagining how it would have played out rather than the actual reality of it. So it was very movie-esque, if you know what I mean, like the Chuckles Crake back and forth. It's the Cobra.
It's the end of the Cobra series,
exactly,
done from Thundercracker's perspective as how he thought it would play out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really funny.
Right.
And it's right at the beginning of the comic as well, so you're kind of like struck with it immediately. Now, what I quite liked about it was it's more of a light-hearted comedic kind of approach, which Transformers does really well with for the most part. It likes kind of taking the mick out of itself. And also I'd like to mention that involved in the I think the colouring of this one is John Paul Bove. So big shout out to John Paul Bove. I love the guy, he's amazing. Now the story is basically, Thundercracker is enlisted by Starscream to create this propaganda movie about Starscream, and all the way through you get like the Thundercracker's kind of like trying to come to terms with making this film and also fighting this moral thing that he should he be making this film because Starscream is a piece of shit and stuff like that. And it's all this like, how is he going to spin it? And he talks, obviously there's lots of kind of dialogue between him and lots of other Transformers. And there's a few other kind of really cool cameos in it. Like Acid Storm pops up in it because he's going to be Starscream in the film, and they're painting him.
Right.
So they're trying to paint him like in Starscream's colours, but the paint's like not sticking on him properly. And in the end, like kind of at the end of it, it's one of those things where Thundercracker is just, he's been building this whole thing up so much. He's been yelling at yelling at Acid Storm so much. So in the end, Thundercracker's had, basically been having a go at Acid Storm the entire time, really like being nasty to him, probably in knowing fully well that he'll quit so that he'll take over as Starscream for the film. And he does, and he makes the film and everything, and then it's right at the point where at the end Starscream's like, well, I don't care. I'm in prison now. Like it's all over. Everything's screwed up, and it kind of brings you into like the current scenario with the comics where they are at the moment and Starscream's imprisonment. And then right at the end, it's really cute, but they kind of keep joking about like, I think it's like the homage to Star Wars, and George Lucas basically. But it's he gets this phone call, JJ Hackensack, and he makes the Space Wars pictures. And it's really cute. He calls him up and says like he loved what his work, he loved what Thundercracker did in the film, and he wanted to like offer him a another film option and all this kind of stuff. So it's like a cute little jokey kind of issue, but nice, a bit of fun, and kind of takes you out of the current storyline of Optimus Prime at the moment. Now if we take a look at the kind of in the same block, we'll look at Optimus Prime, the current issue, Transformers: The Lost Light as well. And more or less kind of combine it into this segment because it kind of makes sense to discuss them all at the same time. Now, what Optimus Prime has been, that's been the serious book. There's always been like a serious book and a jokey one. The Lost Light has a bit more humour in it, a bit more kind of light-hearted kind of comedy and stuff like that. And so currently Optimus Prime, have you read the newest Optimus Prime issue? Yeah,
I'm keeping up on Optimus Prime despite myself. The Optimus Prime is a book that's saved entirely by its artist.
I must admit, it's beautiful art. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of those books where, and I don't want to slag anybody off involved in it, but it suffers more than any other book that they're putting out. It suffers from the fact that there isn't a central conflict going on anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and it was fine. It was fine for the first couple of years when they were dealing with the politics of, okay, we have to bring these refugees home and try to get Cybertron going again.
Yeah.
But it's the Optimus, the robots in disguise, and now the Optimus Prime book. It's never really taken off for me.
Yeah.
It's never like it goes to the bottom of the pile, and I'll get to it when I get to it.
Yeah.
Whereas books like Lost Light and some of the G.I. Joe stuff are at the top of my pile, and I always make sure I read them.
Yeah.
Optimus, like I said, Optimus Prime as a series is saved by the fact that the artist Keizama is amazing.
It's gorgeous, isn't it?
She's fantastic. It's very for anybody who hasn't read it, the art is very reminiscent of something like out of 2000 AD, like ABC Warriors or something like that.
Time, yeah.
Or Transformers Generation 2, the comic from the 1990s that was done by I think it was Manny Galan and Derek Yaniger, where it was like, thick inked lines, very kind of dirty colors.
Yeah, that's Josh Burcham as well on the coloring, and that adds so much to it as well. Like, it's some beautiful like color choices.
The art team are saving this book from being a complete disaster. Because the art is just so nice.
Well, I mean, we've got the possibility now towards the end of this book. Obviously, Onyx Prime has turned up. So it's one of these things where you get the feeling something is going to kick off now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping that in the next issue, we finally see some actual kick-ass Transformers action, because I feel like it's not just the Optimus Prime book, but I felt this way for, like you say, like the entire time that we've had this almost peacetime in the Transformers. Like, I loved initially. I thought that it was really interesting, the kind of exploration of the politics behind everything, and it was like, yes, this is quite cool, and it was mirroring society a little bit at the time, and there was elements of like, kind of all that, they've made that point, but that's that's cool and everything, and then it just kept going, and what I find with the Transformers, and this will come into like the Lost Light as well. And we'll separate these and give you like a kind of review in a second, but just to kind of lump them all together, Lost Light suffers a little bit from what I call like writers showing off, or what I feel like is writers kind of really kind of going at you with all of these like crazy jokes and silly little kind of in references, and it's great because Transformer fans do love that when they get a reference, it's like boom, and most Transformers fans are so on it with this kind of stuff. I mean, just look at TF Wiki. I mean, that website is one of the most amazing, like, kept up to date, like by the second websites I've ever seen. It's incredible. So I know that the information that these guys kind of contain within themselves is brilliant. So that if you're a Transformers fan by and large, you're going to be loving all the little bits and pieces. But as a kind of, I'm not really a casual Transformers fan, but as a kind of, I would say in the mid-range, like I do love Transformers, and I do a lot of research for the kind of video reviews I'm doing, so my knowledge base has improved over the years. But in terms of like reading a comic, just I kind of feel sometimes less is more, and I think that when you look at a page and it is just text, it's like, okay, I'm cool with that in some places, but when we're talking about giant robots that fight giant robots, I don't need so much foreshadowing. I don't need so much like constant, and I think sometimes it is just a bit of a showing off from the writer's point of view.
I think some of the reason, and actually I'd have similar concerns, Chris, I think some of the reason is that every character is witty.
Yes.
They're all telling jokes to each other.
Yes, definitely.
It's and I can see it where James Roberts, who's the writer, he's a big fan of sitcoms, and he's a big fan of probably the same sitcoms we are. Things like Parks and Recreation and Community and Red Dwarf. So he's decided to make a sitcom, but there's no straight man in it. The guy who's getting stuff done.
I feel like even Ultra Magnus is now...
Ultra Magnus was supposed to be that, but now he's like cracking wise.
Yeah, he told a joke, now everyone keeps referencing that again, don't they? Yeah.
He's a figure of fun, so and actually when More Than Meets the Eye started, I loved that book. Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. It was exactly, it is, and I've tried to get people to read it, basically saying it's a sitcom, it's Community with the Transformers, or it's Parks and Rec with the Transformers. But the issue I think the writing team on it had is that Obviously, they have a plan in mind as to, a storyline they want to tell.
Yeah.
And when they're doing a story arc that moves the plot along, like the overall overarching plot along, the book is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because they're getting from A to B to C, and they're driving it along, and you don't really notice the constant jokiness of everybody isn't so irritating because there is a plot being serviced.
Yeah.
But when they do an issue that isn't driving the main story arc along, it gets very lost in kind of self-referential, in-jokey humor.
Big time.
There's been entire half years where they've just kind of lost themselves. Yeah. Like it's the longest quest ever that nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
Don't
get me wrong. I agree with you though. That when like More Than Meets the Eye start, and in fact, like at the start of all these newer runs, I was a massive fan and I loved them. But again, like you kind of you need that change up every now and again. But you need the conflict. It's a comic that you want. You need these giant robots to be battling each other. You need to see the tragedy now. Now that you've seen you've seen the development of the characters and the relationships, which they've focused on a lot as well. So like kind of getting certain characters to be closer with each other, and all of a sudden like there's these relationships blossoming, which is great. But now we need to see the kind of, I suppose, the consequence of building those relationships. We need to see the tragedy and the horrible aspect of war and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's necessary now.
And I think the good thing about the fact that they've said Lost Light is ending with issue 25 is that it will force them to bring the story to a conclusion.
Yeah.
They don't have time to go off and do an issue where Swerve is stuck in a planet made of his own imagination that's based on all the sitcoms he watched on Earth. Every Transformer character in More Than Meets the Eye Last Night is obsessed with some aspect of Earth's pop culture.
Yeah.
In the same way that the writer and presumably a lot of the fans are. You have people like Blue Streak, who's a huge movie fan. They do a movie night on the ship and they're always watching human movies.
Yeah.
We're watching Back to the Future this week, or there's an issue with he has a hoverboard from Back to the Future, and you're like, are you real?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
That they're all so caught up on Earth's pop culture. It's just like, maybe you need to move on. And like I said, that's probably why it's for the best that they've only got 8 or 9 issues left.
Yeah.
Because it'll force them to focus on what the comic is best at. It's best at when it's moving the plot, when it's telling the story, rather than getting sidetracked down these little whimsical little avenues.
Yeah.
And this is the last couple of issues of Lost Light have been doing that. They've been, because they know they don't have much left, they're boxing off. They finished the storyline with the Scavengers, which is great. Like they're an enjoyable team of, they're a fun crew, but also they've probably had about 4 issues too many involving them.
Yeah. Because
at least there's been 3 or 4 issues involving them that just go nowhere.
Yeah.
And actually don't really add a whole lot to the story or the overarching storyline either. It's just the writing team deciding, we're going to have fun with these guys, and they're the same. They're all cracking jokes at each other.
Yeah,
not everybody has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And it just feels like the characters get too samey.
Yeah, I think that in the last Lost Light as well, we discovered this new, not the 16, but in 15, wasn't there this element of babies being created in like biological? Yeah. So I mean,
basically, Scorponok has invented the artificial womb and can make humanized Transformers.
It's kind of getting to the point now where I feel like they are just doing crazy because they know it is coming to the end of the run.
Yeah, a lot of it just seems to be like wheel spinning more than anything. Like, let's throw in a few concepts here that probably won't go anywhere, but hey, it'll be fun and we can make a few jokes about it.
I'll tell you what made me, what reminded me, like the last issue, so 16 of Lost Light, which is the newest one out at the moment, it reminded me of that episode, like the end of Lost, where they're in like purgatory and it's like all that kind of stuff. Spoiler alert, by the way. I've already said spoiler alert, so screw you. So in this issue of the Lost Light, they all just appear randomly in the Afterspark, or what they think is the Afterspark, Rodimus is the only one that's kind of a bit off about this whole thing, and at the end he kind of demands to see the god of this Afterspark, and he's transported to this room where he's surrounded by these giant feckin' robots, or the guiding hand, as Rodimus presumes they are. So that's kind of where you are in that comic. Again, it light-hearted, fun, lots of jokes, but exactly kind of what we've been talking about just then, Paddy, about this overuse of like everyone's funny all the time, and it just, even the character like Whirl, who's supposed to be like dark and horrible and like messed
and essentially up. A damaged psychopath who was a sociopathic murderer.
Yeah, is now this
for the entire war is this guy who's like, oh, I'm fun again.
Yeah, I know, and it's like, okay, it makes him likable and fun, but I'd like him if he was just, the dark, weird, horrible, nasty piece of
bit of an asshole. Yeah, and he was fine as that. And then, we're all friends and we're all having jokes and we're all cracking wise. It's like, guys, it is a book that probably has overstayed its welcome.
Yeah.
Or you've probably read or watched something, and if you go and watch a movie nowadays, you go in after 2.5 hour movie. Most of the times when I come out of cinema, I'm like, that could probably have been 20 minutes shorter.
20 minutes long.
You know the way. It should, but it's you go see a 2.5
Retaliation.
hour movie nowadays.
That could have been an episode. That could have been a TV episode. That could have been
6 minutes, or the length of G.I. Joe Resolute.
That should have been a fan film.
But where you have this thing where everything is kind of a little bit overblown nowadays, and sometimes less is more. And I think with Lost Light and with More Than Meets the Eye, I think had they been told you need to get this wrapped up in 50 issues or less,
it'd have been a classic, wouldn't it?
It would have been a stronger comic for it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you give someone too much rope and they hang themselves with it.
Yeah.
And the storyline didn't need 80 issues, which is what it's going to end up getting.
Yeah.
It could probably have been done in 60. And it would be probably one of the better comics ever released. That sort of way?
Yeah, totally. Again, I have to say that from if you go back to the beginning, Lost Light, there are some absolute beauties, like on some really, really good issues, and some good kind of like small arcs as well in there too. Like it's definitely one of the strongest Transformers comics. I just think you're right. I think it's kind of like it's getting to the point now where it's like the 9th or the 10th season of Friends. I'm done now. I'm good.
Yeah. And this is officially season 3 of this book, because More Than Meets the Eye was kind of split into 2 seasons, separated by a crossover, the Dark Cybertron crossover. So like the first 25 issues are classic. They're the problem with Transformers comics, and actually the problem with all of these Hasbro comics, has been some of them are great toy comics, but there's very few great comics in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's very, like, Transformers vs. Visionaries is pretty good for the Hasbro verse, but it's not pretty good compared to whatever else is out there in comics at the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's better than average, but it's not like,
I mean, that's the constraints.
It's not Watchmen.
Yeah, it's the constraints of the brand, I think, sometimes, isn't it? Like,
but I mean, the early issues of More Than Meets the Eye, the first half of it is good comics.
Yeah, really.
That sort of way, where it stands out. It is the best of the Transformers stuff that's ever been done, and it is the equal. It is the equal of some of the best comics ever done.
Agreed.
Sort of way, the run could be put in the top, 100 runs of any comics ever.
Yeah,
that wouldn't be a problem. But it is something that I think is just outstayed its. I wouldn't say outstayed its welcome, because it's obviously still welcomed, but it's
a bit diluted, is what it is. Yeah,
it's been diluted by the fact that it's probably gone on too long and could have been wrapped up maybe a year or 18 months ago.
Yeah,
and it would have been a perfect, like, here is 60 issues of some great comics, rather than 80 issues of. There's 60 issues of great comics in here, but you have to read 80 issues to do it.
So let's give each of the 3 a rating. So I've only read. I'm the only one that's read Optimus Prime, the annual 2018. So I'm going to go ahead and give that 3 potatoes out of 5. It's a fun little romp. It's a nice little side kind of thing going on. And I know I've just been talking about how much I'm fed up of having everyone being funny in comics and Transformers, but you know, it in and of itself, and a bit of a piss take of itself, it's really good. Optimus Prime, Paddy, The Falling Part 2, issue 16. What would you give that?
The art gets 5, the writing gets 3, so on average it's a 4.
I'm going to give it 3 potatoes out of 5, thus giving it a 3.5 average.
That's probably fair. 3.5 is probably fair.
It's getting rather complicated. Potato complicated. Transformers Lost Light 16. What are you going to give that, Paddy?
I'm going to give that 3.5 potatoes out of 5, Chris.
I'm also going to give Lost Light... I'm not also. I'm going to give it 3 potatoes out of 5. Again, they're solid comics, but I think I'm just so hung up now on my thoughts on all of the Transformers current stuff. But anyway, let's move on and into now what you've all been waiting for, the G.I. Joe
G.I. Joe stuff.
Woohoo!
Only an hour into the show.
Okay, so let's start with Scarlet Strike Force. It's the bombastic final issue, but the fun's not done yet. But that's how it goes when you mix ninjas, talking robots, elite soldiers, maniacal despots, magical snake rituals, and so much more into what people are calling the best action comic ever. Now, I have just read that from the IDW solicitations. It says that it's not done yet, but unfortunately, at issue 3, it is actually done now.
It's totally done.
It's absolutely done. So what Paddy and I are going to do is we're going to discuss the overarching issue 1, 2, and 3, and kind of discuss that in detail. Now, where do we start with Scarlet Strike Force? I mean,
first of all, let's start with the name. Having a G.I. Joe comic with a G.I. Joe in the title is unbelievably stupid. The brand is presumably worth something, so why do you remove the brand from the title of your comic?
Yeah.
There isn't a Transformers comic that doesn't have Transformers in the title somewhere. Even, Optimus Prime has Optimus Prime, who, is the brand in the title of the name. You have Transformers.
It's different with Transformers.
Life.
That can stand on its own. You could have the Bumblebee comic. You could have the whatever comic, and people know what it is.
Those characters are A-listers. Optimus Prime is known to everybody on Earth at this point.
Yeah.
Even my parents know who Optimus Prime is. But you have a G.I. Joe comic with a G.I. Joe in the title, and the title is, let's be honest here, a B-list character. She's not one of the names who comes to your mind when you hear the word G.I. Joe.
Well, let's say, obviously Snake Eyes would have been, I think that would have been that would have been one that could stand on its own 2 feet, is what I'm saying.
And has actually
Storm Shadow.
Snake Eyes' comics.
Storm Shadow's another one. He's had his own comic as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally, I kind of have to agree with some of that, totally.
The second part is that over the 3 issues, Scarlet is barely in it.
That was what I was going to say. We've hardly seen Scarlet.
I think she in the 3rd issue. She might be in 3 panels of this 3rd issue. I haven't counted to check, but if she has more than 1 line of dialogue, I'll be amazed. If
you're using that logic, it would have made more sense to call it Quick Kick Strike Force, because he's in every panel. Now, okay, so first off, obviously, it's quite a sensitive issue whenever we talk about this comic, because there was so much kind of toxicity around it with all of the bullshit that went on, prior to now,
mm-hmm.
And again, I don't even like talking about it because I just really want to, trying to remain positive in the G.I. Joe community is like, I don't know, is like throwing a potato into a pile of Irishmen. It's just not going to work.
We don't get so excited by them, Chris. We got feels of them at the back.
The famine is over. But yeah,
the famine is over.
So what I would say though is that so first off, I loved the G.I. Joe Street Fighter crossover, or Street Fighter X G.I. Joe that Aubrey did. Absolutely adored that comic. I thought it was so much fun. Short run, obviously, but it was a nice little kind of self-contained little story, and it was just fun and brilliant, and the characters worked in those scenarios because it's like the ridiculous nature of Street Fighter, but also the ridiculous nature of the Sunbow G.I. Joe elements and stuff like that. So it worked really well. What I think I've struggled with Aubrey's run. I have to say, I've struggled in for lots of different reasons. Now, I understand what he was attempting to do. I understand what he was going for in trying to make it like that kind of fun, action-packed, and so on and so forth. But I think when you're constantly like telling people that this is the best thing ever or this is the best thing ever, you really have to live up to that. And I've struggled really hard to read these comics. I find some of the characterization really weak. I found that, you know, to make Quick Kick this kind of like piece of shit, kind of douchebag, I found that really hard to swallow, because in the first couple of issues, or in the first issue, he's shot, he's injured, so he's like completely worthless. He turns up to that fight with no weapons, and that's what you get. Effectively, you get shot. And then the next time we see him, he's completely changed character. He's an asshole. He's suddenly fully fit again, like he's, you know, like there was nothing, you know, that hurt him previously. And now he's fighting Snake Eyes. Like, that whole thing made no sense to me. Like, it wasn't the whole like build up to that, like Snake Eyes and Helix coming back and getting yelled at and imprisoned for kind of going against what Scarlet said or whatever. But then to like say, right, Snake Eyes, you and me are gonna have a fight, and then after this fight, it just felt like a 5-year-old had written that scene. And no, again, I don't want to sound like that sounds really disrespectful. I don't want to like come across that way, but it just did not feel right to me. And the whole and up to this point now, I've just really struggled with it. But what are your thoughts, Paddy, on specifically this 1 to 3?
I'll be honest with you, I was going to drop this book when it relaunched.
Yeah.
And then the whole thing came out about people complaining about Salvo being a female, and I was like, you know what, I don't want to be on the same side as those assholes, so I'm going to keep buying it.
I think that's, yeah, it's I agree. It was like, you don't want to be on that side. You don't want to be that guy.
I didn't want to be that guy. I was like, you know what? If all these guys are dropping the book because they're assholes, well, then I'm going to give IDW my $12 until this book is cancelled. Because I want to be on the right side of history here.
Were you?
I'll be the guy that says, you assholes, and you know who you are.
Were you?
And I'm not going to name you on air, but you know who you are.
Were you happy then that it kind of got cancelled, because then you didn't have to buy it anymore?
Well, the issue is that it's not been a very good comic, and I had high hopes for this run. I really enjoyed Street Fighter X G.I. Joe. When we interviewed Aubrey about a year and a half ago, his enthusiasm for G.I. Joe won me over. Yeah. Because we had him scheduled for a 1-hour interview on the show, and he talked to us for God knows how many hours.
About 3.
About G.I. Joe. It was about 3. Like he was doing a signing that evening, and he was late for the signing because he was talking to us, because he was so enthusiastic to talk to people about G.I. Joe and how he was going to work, what he was doing with it, what he wanted to do. And I know myself, you and Dave interviewed him. At the end of the call, when Aubrey hung up on us and we were, finishing up and saying our goodbyes, Dave said basically, that guy's enthusiasm has really won me over to the relaunched book.
Big time, yeah.
Yeah, and he had from I think that us two at least, he had a lot of he got us enthusiastic about the book, and then over the course of a year he just ground that down to nothing.
Yeah.
By just not delivering. And Scarlet Strike Force with the relaunch, it's the same. He didn't up his game whatsoever. It's the team. I liked a couple of the characters he brought in. I actually really liked the idea of the female Salvo. I think she's actually a really good addition to the G.I. Joe brand.
Yeah.
And in the same way that characters like Windblade carried on into Transformers and into other media from the comics, I hope the Salvo carries over to other media. Like, I wouldn't be adverse to seeing her in a future G.I. Joe cartoon.
I'd actually really enjoy an action figure of that. I think she'd be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like her as a design and as a concept, So I hope if something is pulled out of the burning building that is the IDW G.I. Joe comics, I hope she is pulled out of the burning building and resuscitated
Yeah.
even if everything else, even if everything else burns in the conflagration. So that is one thing I liked about the book. But the rest of it has been, it's just been very bizarre choices.
I found it confusing at times. Like I just
Yeah.
I look at it sometimes and just think I don't know. I think a lot of it is the understanding of it. I'm hoping that further down the line I'll kind of come back to it and go, like it'll click. But at the moment, I just do not get it. I don't understand the pacing. I don't understand where the story. I mean, that first one. I tell you what, I was on board. And when Rock and Roll shoots the at a Grand Slam, I was like, I'm in. This is going to be amazing. Not one thing following that book did I have the same feeling for again. And
No,
I thought that
exactly,
that and
exactly.
and obviously like Thundercracker, the reveal at the end of that comic as well. It was like it had so many things going on, and you just couldn't but you couldn't think straight. And it was like, this is going to be brilliant, and it just didn't go on for that. It didn't continue. And I think
No.
if I don't know, like it's easy saying, oh, just keep being brilliant the whole time. Like that's easy to say. Like if you can pull 5 issues out of your I think you're a really talented writer, comic creator. But in this case, when you've got like a long brand, kind of like an arc, a long arc to kind of build on and everything, I don't know, I didn't get it. And there were just the dialogue back and forth. It wasn't something I recognised. And I'm not one of those people that needs the vintage every single time. I don't. I'm happy for the brand to progress, to move on, to change. I love that. I love that about the the diversity in G.I. Joe and so on. It's one of the reasons I really am drawn to it. What I really struggled with though was like finding something in this particular run that I could get my teeth into, or like I could kind of get hold of. And it was just like everything was so all over the place, and then all of a sudden there's a giant Fatal Fluffy, and then there's this, and then there's that, and it was almost like the ramblings of a maniac.
Originally that arc with the Fatal Fluffies, that was supposed to be the Inhumanoids.
That's what I'm yeah. I mean, why wasn't that Inhumanoided up?
No, but he confirmed it was pitched as Inhumanoids, and they turned him down.
No,
they said you
way.
can't use Inhumanoids. Yeah.
Why not? They own it, don't they?
Yeah, but maybe they want to use it for something else.
Oh, okay, well, there's the additional to the combined universe that I really want to happen, which is great because we are doing an Inhumanoids episode in about 5 episodes' time.
But Siderson did confirm on Facebook that it had originally been pitched as the Inhumanoid G.I. Joe versus the Inhumanoids, and it didn't get past editorial.
I vaguely remember that, but I feel like that's new information to me. No, that's awesome. That's cool. Well, in that case, that you have. I'd give it to him if
just so we're not overly negative on Scarlet Strike Force. I should say that one thing that did make me smile was to have the repainted Desert Fox.
Oh, big time!
Thrown in there. That was great crack. Well, the problem I had with that is if you read those 3 issues, the size of that vehicle changes from panel to panel.
Yeah, big time.
Like in some. It's a regular sized Desert Fox, then it's slightly bigger, and then by the 3rd issue of Scarlet Strike Force, it is the biggest 4-wheeled vehicle ever created.
Made. Yeah, there's like 3 of them sitting in the front seat, and they're like tiny. Yeah. They're like like Mousers. I was going to say that it's another homage there, Paddy. It's the Dino Hunters Desert Fox repaint.
Yeah, so. I know that, but and that's why I smiled. I thought it was great to see it in there, the dino repaint. But because they're hunting dinosaurs in this arc.
You see, that's another thing. I really love the fact that the dinosaurs were in there, and you had Crocmaster and Raptor, who I thought that's just brilliant. I mean, that it works. Those two are kind of like with dinosaurs.
The odd couple.
But what the dinosaurs? Where did that come from? I missed something big, and again, I love it and I want to see more of that kind of shit going on, but it just didn't. Nothing was ever explained or really made any sense. And I think that was probably something that Aubrey was going for, though. He wanted it to be crazy and all over the place, but I think sometimes when things work and they're crazy and all over the place, there is still a shred of logic behind it. There's still like an element of there's a reason for this mentality going on. But in this particular situation, I think it was just throw things there and just go nuts with it. And sometimes again that can work, but
It's almost like he was free associating.
yeah.
He sat down with a blank piece of paper, wrote G.I. Joe, and then all around it he had all these bubbles saying dinosaurs, spacemen, Spitfire, female salvo, question mark.
And also,
And he
how
just-
did Spitfire become a G.I. Joe? I don't get what wasn't he like a soccer player or something? I don't
even know.
I don't
Chris.
know what happened
It
there.
just happened. Yeah, and that's the problem. Too much in the book just happened.
Yeah.
And I can understand why G.I. Joe fans didn't like the book. I can understand why some G.I. Joes didn't like the writer as a person. But I think had the book been better, just better, I think it would have survived longer. It wasn't good enough that the writer that the writer could get away with baiting the fandom in the way he did, because, like I said, some people are upset over certain things. Some people are upset over things he said on social media. If the book had been good, I think he would have been forgiven a lot of that. And the problem is that the book wasn't at the quality it needed to be. Like it's on the lower end of what IDW are putting out in terms of quality, and that's all we can really say about it. Like most of the Transformers books are better. Transformers vs. Visionaries has been better. G.I. Joe versus the $6 Million Man has been better. Sorry to spoil that.
Spoiler alert.
And but of the seven or eight books we're talking about here today, it's not in the top 5.
Yeah.
And that's actually kind of sad for G.I. Joe as a brand as well, because they're done now in comics, because IDW aren't going to touch this with a barge pole again, because of all the stuff that happened on earlier this year regarding it.
Yeah. So with that said, what are you going to score Scarlet Strike Force overall?
It's probably a 2. And I'm probably being generous with that.
I'm also going to give it a generous 2 potatoes out of 5, just so we can move on quickly. 2.
And as an Irish person, I can tell you can cook very little with only 2 potatoes.
You can have 2 baked potatoes.
2 potatoes isn't a meal, guys.
So next up is G.I. Joe versus the $6 Million Man. Again, we'll stay in this segment. I'm not going to be bursting all over the place. The greatest American heroes go face to face with the most dangerous living weapon, Steve Austin. Hacked by Cobra, the $6 Million Man has the G.I. Joes in his bionic sights as the fate of world peace hangs by a thread, and Cobra Commander holds the world's infrastructure in his venomous clutches. Loved this. Really enjoyed this first issue. I'd been looking forward to it for ages, and even when it was announced, loads of people going, "Oh, why? Who cares? $6 Million Man, what?" But then I felt like there were a few, including me, that were just like, "This is amazing! Oh my god, I can't wait! This is going to be brilliant!" And like I don't know why, I just felt like it worked really well, and for them to make it like this period piece is just brilliant. So what we get effectively is like you go all the way back and you're kind of having a flashback moment where you can now have characters that are dead in the current run reappear. But aside from that, let's talk about this comic, Paddy. What did you think of the first issue?
It's a lot of fun, and it's exactly what one of my local comic store here does, like a weekly roundup of what's selling in their store. Based on what they order in and who's coming in and who's interested in the book, and kind of a little bit of feedback on what people seem to think about books.
Yeah.
And their only comment on G.I. Joe versus $6 Million Man was, "It looks like IDW put words into a random generator, and this is what came out at the end." in terms of a title, because
Brilliant.
the idea is a bit stupid. Let's be honest. Like the concept of mashing these two things together, but it works. And it works because it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah.
It knows it's dumb fun. It knows it's stupid. It is an episode of a Sunbow cartoon written large. It is just a dumb idea, and they said, "Well, we're going to go with it," and it's all the better for it, I think.
Big time. What I loved the little kind of things in there, like when Storm Shadow's on the roof, like when they're kind of like coming out of that giant snake-headed plane, that the VTOL that Cobra used to have in the Sunbow cartoon. He's got this giant 80s phone, like the one of those old like military field phones.
Mobile phones.
It's absolutely genius. I love that, because obviously back then they still were doing like future stuff. So you'd still see Storm Shadow with a small like communicator, but they've given him a massive 80s phone. Like, I just love that. That's brilliant.
It's fun to see stuff like the Phantom X-19 jet.
Yeah.
Put into the comic.
We've got Ace, we've got Ghost Rider back.
We've got Ace, you've got Ghost Rider.
They also call him Ghost Rider, which I thought was interesting.
They could probably get away with it because it's not a Marvel comic.
Yeah. Not yet.
The whole point was Ghost Rider in the original run was because they couldn't use another Marvel character's name.
Yeah.
Because it would have been confusing. So it's fun. How long is this? Is this another 4 or 5 issue series? It is, isn't it?
It's a short one. Yeah, I think I want to say 5.
Right. I think any longer than that, it would probably run off the rails.
Yeah.
As long as they can keep it quick and breezy and clipping along, so you don't have to think about what's going on, I think it'll be fine. And I'm looking forward to the second issue.
I'll tell you what. One of the main things I love about G.I. Joe comics with the special missions and the fact that these kind of like standalone. I've said this like so many times on the podcast. The people that listen to this, brother, we know you say it every time, every episode you say it, Chris. But I love the special missions because they were these short bursts of like showing the specialists doing what they do best. And I like this little crossovers that they do. I like that they kind of take you away to the side and they go, here's a bit of fun, and then you enjoy that, and then you come back to the regular arc, and it kind of breaks up that. I don't know, it's not always monotony, and obviously one thing I would say about, we're kind of getting onto it in a second, and I'll discuss that in more detail, is that the Real American Hero comic, for a while, I think had started to stagnate. And so obviously I think but not at this point at the moment. I think it's really good at the moment. But I think it needed more of these little special mission crossover type things happening. Now, after we finish when we get to the end of 250 and it goes to 251, Real American Hero, we're going to get special mission style one-offs for 5 issues, which I think is great. But one of the reasons I used to love it was because we'd get other characters involved and we'd get to see what other particular like characters, you know, that we don't usually see, fringe characters. Now, the first 2 are Stalker and the Baroness, and I was kind of a little bit like, okay,
same people again.
It's the same characters again, but the artwork that we've seen for that Stalker issue looks phenomenal. I think that is going to be a massive, that's for me. That's going to be an issue I really love. The Baroness one, I mean, okay, I'll take that. And if they do something really cool with it, and we see again, like if we see some more fringe characters in there too, that would be great. We'll see. We'll have to see. But I'm looking forward to that, you know, special mission one-off thing again, because I think every now and again I need that with G.I. Joe. Now, $6 Million Man, let's give a potato rating let's do that. Potato rating for $6 Million Man, Paddy.
4. I'm
going to give it 4.5 because I'm massively generous today and I loved it so much. I also like the fact that his get-up when he was like Cobra-fied, he kind of looked a little bit, because he was in that brown claw, but his deco kind of looked a little bit Major Altitude-y, and I was kind of like looking at him going, oh, that's really cool. But anyway, that's irrelevant. But yes, 4.5 out of 5 potatoes. Now, moving on to issue 249 of A Real American Hero. Now, as I said before, I felt like, and this is no diss to Larry, who's an amazing writer, and he's been doing this for so long now, but I felt that he'd been generally phoning it in for a long period of time, and that's not to say that it wasn't good. It's just I got the feeling that it was like there was some plot things that were never kind of, you know, we never came back to, like the giant eye. Like, what was that about?
It was going to be a Transformers crossover. He had planned out to do a Transformers crossover, and he was setting up for that. And then IDW said, "Oh, we're going to do a real one. We're bringing in Revolution and the other main books." So
we'll just bury that under a pile of crap.
Forget all about that, Larry. You're not doing a Transformers crossover because we're crossing over everybody on the other side of the other side of the building. So so forget about it. And he confirmed that that's the case.
Good. What I did, that wasn't the only thing. There was a lot of kind of elements that were going on. A few kind of like the whole Sneak Peek issue had to retcon the fact that Sneak Peek survived. That wasn't going to be planned initially. He just, he'd made the mistake. And I just got the feeling that, there wasn't like that love being poured into it. And I think with Larry anyway, he's not so much a fan of it. He created it, and sometimes he feels a little bit kind of like angry that that's what he's remembered for only. And obviously he's done amazing things elsewhere.
I 100% got that impression from him the time I met him.
I mean, every panel
I get
it,
like G.I. Joe.
But what he's done recently with this Dawn of Arashikage thing is brilliant, and I've really enjoyed it. And it's given so many, like, I don't know, it's given G.I. Joe like real like injection again, and I think that he's enjoying it, and I think he's focusing on the things that he does really well, like the ninja aspect and the, you know, all that kind of like the you know, it's been based in Tokyo for most of it, so like, you know, he's just like really enjoying that aspect of it, and also like the, you know, the whole thing of Dawn inside, Snake Eyes inside Dawn's mind. Using the brainwave scanner, that's like ingenious for me. I really like what they did there. I would say though that I just get the feeling that we're going to see the original Snake Eyes come back, and then we'll have like 3 Snake Eyeses, and I have a feeling that will happen. That is not something that is definitely going to happen. It hasn't been mentioned anywhere. I just feel I have this compulsion that all of a sudden Snake Eyes is going to turn up again out of the ground.
They'll clone a Serpentor-like body for him and stick his brainwaves into that or something, right?
Yeah, and it'll just be like, you know, and I just had this convoluted Snake Eyes threesome. Now, obviously, I didn't really enjoy the fact that I think he should have killed Snake Eyes and be done with it. Not with Dawn, but with
Throwdown or whatever
kind of
his name
scenario.
is.
Yeah, I think if that hadn't been done, I'd have felt like first of all more sadness towards Snake Eyes dying, and secondly, it would have been it almost felt like an easy way out. And then all of a sudden this Dawn of Arashikage thing happens. Now I don't think he had that in mind when he was thinking about Snake Eyes becoming a different character, you know, in that really weird way with the flying robot thing. I don't even want to go into that. But I think that, you know, had he had this Dawn of Arashikage idea around that time, I don't think we would have seen the showdown of Snake Eyes thing happen. But as we now have 2 Snake Eyes characters. But this, I'm loving what they're doing, and the art from Nitho Diaz is just gorgeous. I love what Milan Parvanov is doing with the colouring as well. I mean, it's really vibrant, and it's got this kind of like nice tone, like almost like it's being lit by explosive flame the whole time. Like it's really, really vibrant, and I'm really loving it. But more than anything, there's that panel when you've got the team of Joes, including Showdown Snake Eyes, with Budo, Storm Shadow, Stalker, and Scarlet in the helicopter, and I loved it. It was like, great, we've got Budo back, and he's going to do something awesome, and Firefly appears in it, and then he's going to be kicking off, and there's a massive fight, and I love the fact that Firefly had tricks up his sleeve and so on and so forth as well. I really enjoyed that about it. Is there anything that's standing out about you about this issue, Paddy? Is this something you're enjoying at the moment?
I haven't been reading Arena Millican Hero at all.
You haven't?
So sorry.
No, that's fine. I'm surprised.
I haven't. I just haven't got into it again. Sorry.
From what are we talking, from the relaunch?
Yeah, since it relaunched by IDW like 7 years ago, I just decided,
you
know what, I'm done with it. I decided I just wasn't going to get on board with it. I just didn't see the point of it.
Right.
I know I'm probably going to be hit over the head with a mallet any second now. But
I can put that sound effect in.
I have to say this. I don't like this nostalgia for nostalgia's sake thing that we're currently going through. And I thought, you know what? It ended 20 years ago. It didn't need to be done.
Yeah.
I would have preferred. I just thought, why? The story was done and ended quite well back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I never saw a need, or sorry, I know there was a need because obviously people are buying the book, but I never saw a person need to revisit those stories or carry on where it left off. And it was the same thing when they did that Transformers Generation 1 redo book as well, which launched around the same time. Regeneration 1. I just was like, why? What's the point? It ended quite well. I didn't see why they would rake up those coals again. I would prefer to see those people do something new.
Yeah.
Give Larry a new Joe Buck and say, go nuts. Do what you do, but you don't need to worry about whether Sneak Peek is dead or, the character ages or what's gone on before or, Trushula Bisma. Do something new with it. Because, he's the guy who created all these characters. He is the guy who shaped them all as well. I would have liked to have seen him do something utterly new with it.
Yeah.
If they'd said, you know what, do what you did back in the 1980s. Do what you think needs to be done to keep this team relevant today, rather than go back and relive old glories.
Yeah.
So I didn't get on board with it at the start. I just kind of said I don't need to read it.
Sure.
I know that probably sounds like really rude or something, but I just didn't see.
No,
it didn't excite me.
No, that's fine. I again, like when it first came back, I was like really up for it. I was like, this is gonna be amazing. Really enjoyed it, what he was doing, and then it kind of petered out a little bit, where it was just because I was just getting it for the sake of it and kind of okay, going through the motions. Then the Red Shadows were introduced, and that kind of really kind of just changed. I was like, oh great, this is amazing. And the fact that they've kind of been like dripped in and out of issues as we've gone along, I've really been kind of into that. And we also get, although they get his name wrong, we get the Iron Major in at the end of this book appear, when in actual fact it is the Black Major. And I put a jokey post on the Facebook page, but people were kind of like saying, well, obviously it's the Black Major, and I'm like, well, yeah, I know. I was kind of being a bit sarcastic with it, but go ahead, keep telling me what you really think. But yeah, I really I love that. It's when you put a post out there with a hint of sarcasm in it, and nobody realizes, and it's just like, and then you get like reams of information underneath going, well, in actual fact, I think you'll find that in 1933, it's like, oh god, it was a joke. But anyway, irrelevant to that. I've really
see, this is the problem. The G.I. Joe fandom has the opposite problem that the cast of The Lost Light have. The cast of The Lost Light, everybody's a sense of humour. The G.I. Joe fandom, nobody has.
Oh, goodness. Anyway, before we lose all of our listeners and viewers and whatever else you can call us, let's give... Well, I'll give the 249 Dawn of the Ashikagi a 4.5 potatoes out of 5. Real solid work from Larry Hama. Beautiful artwork from Nitho Diaz. Absolutely smashing it. Yeah, and can't wait. Funny enough, I can't wait for them to tie up this arc and then get into those special mission kind of jobbies. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our kind of comics view. Let's shift over into some pretty sad news. Chris Ryall leaves IDW Publishing. As many of you will have heard, Chris Ryall, who was the Chief Creative Officer and Editor-in-Chief of IDW Publishing, left the company last week and made a statement to say, I'm stepping aside to take a break, get off the never-ending deadline train and see what new challenge makes the most sense as my next move. It might seem short at times, but 14 years is a long time to do anything. I've certainly never done anything else in my life for this amount of time. The news came as a shock to most people as a huge wave of support found its way to Chris on numerous social networking platforms. We wish him all the best in whatever he does following his recent exit. The comics industry is a lesser place for it. When this news broke, Paddy, it felt like it'd been a death. The amount of kind of... I saw the kind of the social, stuff kind of pouring in the Twitter feed, Facebook feed. And, I mean, Chris is absolutely loved in the comics industry and by IDW. This is is this going to be one of those things where it's a bit of a blow for IDW? Is this going to be a problem for IDW?
I'm not sure. There's plenty of people in IDW who are quite talented.
Yeah.
The Chris Ryall though is the nicest person in comics
in the world.
I think you will not find anybody with a bad word to say about him. He is absolutely amazing. Any creative person who's worked with him, anybody who sent a pitch to him, will say he has got time for everybody. I actually met him last year. I had a little brief interview with him as I tried to pitch him some ideas. He came to Dublin for our Comic-Con here, and I managed to grab him for a half an hour of his time to chat to him as I tried to pitch him my idea for an Action Force miniseries.
Action Potato.
Yes.
Potato Force.
and I chatted to him for half an hour, and he took all my samples, he took all that sort of stuff back with him.
Brilliant.
And he said I'll email you on Tuesday. This is on like a Sunday, and he said I'll email you on Tuesday when I'm back in the office, and we'll chat. And that Tuesday, I thought, well, that's nice, but he's never going to get back to me.
Yeah, you'll never hear from him again.
I've sent in pitches to publishers before. I've sent in emails to publishers before. Book publishers, comics publishers, IP companies, whatever you have, and nobody ever gets back to you. It is the secret. It is they never tell you if you want to try and make something and create something that nobody ever responds to your emails. So I never thought I'd hear from him again. Tuesday morning, I had an email from him saying, "Oh, it was really nice to meet you. I have your stuff. Can you send me on your stuff by email? I want to send it on to the G.I. Joe and Transformers editors here in IDW."
Wow.
Yeah, and I did. And
it's just a shame those guys weren't as responsive.
Just a shame those guys. It's just a shame those guys never responded, huh? So he was a guy. If he said that is a treasure beyond measure in comics and publishing, for someone to say, "I will email you back," and for them to do it. And I think it's proof that of the sort of person he was, where there's no falseness about Chris. If he says, and that's the one thing that everybody will say to you about him, is that he is the most genuine person you'll ever meet. So I think he'll be sorely missed in IDW. He was a really great ambassador for them. He was a great ambassador for their books. He's a talented writer himself. He did a book about the history of comics a few years ago. That is essential for anybody who wants to understand comics at all. It is. I definitely would recommend it if you're interested in creating comics or the history of how comics are created. His book is essential reading. So he's a fantastic writer. He's a fantastic editor, and a really nice gentleman. And IDW are going to be all the lesser for not having him, I'd say.
It's a shame, and it's also a bit of a sad reflection on most industries that someone who is so nice stands out. If you obviously life is hard. Life is a harsh mistress, but I kind of feel that is one of those traits that is missing throughout most of the industries out there. Like, no one has time for anything but whatever is on their plate. And I think as soon as you kind of open up to the fact that there are other things going on, there are other people out there that you would probably do well to listen to, or to take some advice from, or to even just give an opportunity to, I think that it's a shame that Chris stands out as probably the only person that you'd probably get that from, and it's a shame. I mean, I'm sure there are other people out there that are just as nice and good like that at that level of business, but I'm probably yet to meet anyone like that. I would actually say, I will give Daryl a shout out here, because Daryl DePriest, Mark Webber, those are two guys that I would kind of put in that territory of being really nice, really approachable, will always get back to you, will always help in any way they can. Those guys are in a similar scenario, I would have to say as well. There are more of you guys out there than I'm giving credit for.
A few more.
Yeah, like two.
Yeah, but for the editor-in-chief of a, is it the third biggest comics publisher?
I think it is. Yeah.
To get back to me, some random dude he met at a con who had a few pitches for G.I. Joe and Action Force stories, to get back to him within days of meeting him is, like I said, is a reflection of how great a guy he is, I think. And like I said, I really do wish him the best. I'd say any other business that he goes into in entertainment, or whether he goes into working for a movie studio or working for Netflix or whatever, they'll be lucky to have him, I think, because he's just such a great guy.
Hear. Well said. We wish Chris Ryall all the best, and we hope he goes on to even bigger and better things from then on. So that's it for this instalment of the Full Force Comics Burst. Thank you to my awesome co-host Paddy. See you next time, and as always, Full Force. Make sure you get involved with the discussion by liking, sharing and commenting on these videos, and as always you can keep up with the show after listening by following on Twitter @TheFullForce, liking the Facebook page, facebook.com/TheFullForce, and if you would like to contact the show you can message us on either of those platforms with feedback questions, or just a troll. Look out for more of these comic bursts on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, our Facebook page, Twitter feed, and YouTube channel from now on. Full force. And a big shout out to our sponsors, Distant Planet Comics and Collectibles, located at 601 Business Loop 70 West Suite 263, located in the Parkade Center, Columbia, Missouri. You can visit their website at distantplanetcomics.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/Distant Planet Comics.